One more time. Howdy. There we go. All right. Well, so what'd y'all think of Charlie's presentation? Pretty powerful, right? Yeah. Okay, well, did you get the message about pace during his presentation? I think so. So our last session is about, guess what? Pace planning, resilient communications. And Charlie is going to lead it. Take it away.
Okay, yes. So we were just joking up here. Appreciate the feedback after. I think my probably some of our panel members. Hey. So. So we can get into pace a little bit more. Now, once I find my sheet. Let's. Yes. All right, here's our panel. Resilient communications, again, continue on with pace. So the whole thing is understanding communications landscape. We just jot down some of the communications mechanisms, and as you read that over, I'm hoping there's others to the list that we don't have, but just something to start the conversation on what it takes to have good solid communications capability. So my colleagues, I'm trying to avoid you guys framing your next. But anyway, so what is PACE? It's more than just another acronym. We already highlighted primary, ultimate, emergency, and emergency. PACE is a methodology. It's developed by the military. We're not geniuses. This is some simple stuff. The military use it for their austere locations. We are just now applying it. And the reason that I got so passionate of it, if you would have seen the deer in the headlight looks that I had to experience when we talked about the topic, I knew we had to create standardization. Oftentimes in roll calls, things are passed down by folklore, and we needed standardization and a framework to be able to put back on. And that's part of the reason we developed PACE. Again, primary, ultimate, contingency, and emergency. So here is a basic PACE template, and you could talk it through. So for the first responder, automatically, the LMR, the land-made mobile radio, the alternate is a cell phone. Contingency could be satellite, and emergency could be that runner going from point to point to get the message. For that office worker that doesn't have LMR, they can be email as their primary. Their alternate could be their desk phone. Their contingency could be cell phone, and the emergency could be a rendezvous point, pre-designated area that, hey, we have an emergency, we can't communicate, let's rally somewhere. And again, you have to have that in the plan. So something to consider about when you're talking about PACE. Then we go linear, right? Single agency, multiple PACE plan. And when you talk about one specific technology and voice, you kind of have to pace that out from the primary, alternate, contingency, emergency capability. The same thing with data, and the same thing with video. And with my panel members here, and this happens for mutual aid. It's great that you know your PACE plan. You can imagine in the environment that I work in, what good is my PACE plan that my partners that I work with on a daily basis if I don't know their PACE plan? And we have to share those resources. So you have to know the community you work in. Otherwise, you're going to be talking amongst yourselves. And that's usually, you don't solve X in that capacity. So again, multi-agency mutual aid PACE plan as well. And we're going to keep this slide up as I work with my panel here and try to continue the education. So, although I always feel inferior for my wardrobe, we always have from California, very colorful. You guys could always pick them out. But I shared with you my experiences. The District of Columbia is 68 square miles. I'm smaller than every county probably in the country, right? And then I look at Butch, who we've spent a lot of time in meetings and mixed with. He has the state of California. Butch, how many BCs can fit in California?
So I don't know the answer to that,
Well, let me get it with you.
but thankfully none are there.
Yeah. So the actual 68 square miles can fit in California 2,282 times.
Oh.
So, I mean, he's got a big responsibility there. So, Buzz, I want to start the conversation with you. Again, California Public Safety Communications Director, on again, off again, statewide interoperability coordinator. So, you've spoken to this group about 911. Can you elaborate on PACE plan for each of your emergency communication centers?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I have a slide that's going to help me talk through this. So this is a graphic that covers our PACE planning for our 911 system. When we designed our 911 system in the state of Washington, it had a statewide 911 outage. And I said, no, I'm not going to be standing in front of the legislature explaining why we spent, X hundreds of millions of dollars on a 911 system that's down. So what you see is part of the PACE plan. So they included in this is primary, alternate, emergency, and contingency plan for our entire system. As 911 calls come in, we have 2 different next-gen core service providers connected to every single PSAP in the state. One is connected to all of them, and because you never want to have a plan that you don't exercise, we have a primary call flow for that statewide provider of our voice over IP incoming 911 calls and our small local exchange carriers. So roughly 6% of our call volume runs through them statewide. Then we broke the state up into 4 regions, assigned each region to each provider, and we tested failovers between all of them. So we can fail anywhere from where the carrier ingresses, that aggregation you see on this chart, all the way through the system. The only time we'll have an outage is if an entire, we're active and everything we build and all that. If an entire region goes down because of the way SIP works, those active SIP sessions are destroyed. Can't help that. That's the way SIP works. They'd have to call back in, but they'd immediately be reconnected back to the proper center. So that's from a connectivity perspective. When we built the network out to each of the PSAPs, we included, dual fiber connections from 2 different providers where available. And then we built in this robust LTE solution. It's built by this company called DeGiro. It's a blended technology that takes all of the SIM cards and puts them in active mode at the same time. We've had this network up for over 2 years. There's over 4,000 endpoints in the network. It's all IPv6, 0 seconds of downtime for years. And California, we make it, flood it, shake it, freeze it, like we do all of it. And we've had parts of the network go down, but not the entire thing. Another part of this ecosystem that's really important to consider is your cybersecurity framework that's rolled into this, because you have to have that built into layers as well. So this network is in place. If this entire network goes down, then we resolve back to plain 10-digit dialing into PSAP. So we have that plan in place with all of our carriers as well. So it's very complicated, and it takes time to even explain to somebody what we've built, let alone how to test it and implement it. But I can't emphasize enough, and I know Charlie spoke to this, if you have a plan in place, you have to exercise the plan or it really won't work. So we do exercise this frequently, just in the natural course of business as circuits fail, and we watch the performance of the network.
So a follow-up question, in the event of a catastrophic event to occur in one of these state PSAPs, as an exhaust from their PACE plan, is there a plan to roll over 911 operations to another PSAP in a different location, part of a larger state plan?
We do have that. There are 2 limitations to any plan like that. If they're a smaller center, it's easy to do. But Los Angeles PD has 168 positions. No one is going to back them up. I mean, it's just not possible. So in our very large centers, they really just defend in place. And they do have backup centers and backup facilities that we fund and build network to, so they have a bug out location, but really they're backing themselves up. They're just too large for another agency to handle thousands of calls a minute, or whatever they get at peak hours. So that's the limitation there. And then obviously for a backup PSAP, you have to consider, I can get a call to them, no problem with NextGen 911, but they've also got to have a CAD system that they can dispatch the units in the field and a radio system. So we do have some statewide interoperability radio channels and stuff, so we can solve that piece, but it's the CAD one right now that is our limiting factor. And we're in the process of building out a statewide CAD solution that could maybe facilitate that as well. But that's really the limitation. For these really large centers, I have about 10 of them. They just can't be backed up. They're just too big.
And you know, that statewide CAD solution is, I think, becoming more and more of a reality. The PSAPs used to be, you know, extremely local, but there's 2 or 3 that have statewide systems in place. And I know Rob Dew and I have been working with Iowa. They're doing the statewide CAD procurement right now. So I think you're going to see more of that. And I think it's good because they can do things like this at a large scale from a statewide perspective and do, you know, as events at a greater scale than any individual PSAP can. So that's part of the picture, I think, in terms of PACE planning.
Thanks, John. And since you have the mic, let's segue into Mr. John Testable, Director of Public Safety Solutions for Skyline Technology. John, a large part of the emergency communications ecosystem has to do with real-time situational awareness. And you heard me mention the key component is the ability to see. I got that from you. So video is so important to the decision-making process. What are some steps that we can advise the audience to include video as part of a PACE plan?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, but I used that as 4 questions that you used in your presentation. When I was the SWIC in Maryland 1,000 years ago under Governor Ehrlich, it was I was asked to write the executive order that was going to create the SWIC position. So I was in essence writing my own job description. So I went home and had a rather sleepless night and said, what have I got myself into? So I wrote an 8-page executive order that had laid out the SIEC and governance and everything else. And I said, what does the SWIC really care about? And the SWIC cares about those 4 things. Where is it? What do we know about it? Can we talk about it? And can we see it? And at the time, most of the SWICs were focused almost exclusively on land mobile radio. But we had a vision for statewide GIS program because, as you know, from a PSAP standpoint, statewide addressing is a huge pain in the butt. So we had a vision that was broad and it included video. And when I talk to public safety agencies all the time, I say, you know, what are your plans for video? And you know, a lot of the times they have siloed solutions. So think about it. You've got dash cameras on the car. You've got body worn cameras now. You've got license plate readers, right? And you've got fixed cameras that the highway agencies, my background's in transportation, there's highway agency cameras everywhere. So if you don't have a plan for video and how you're dealing with video, you're at a disadvantage. Not to mention, you know, you have a lot of cloud solutions now, but the costs associated with sending information, video information to the cloud, can eat you alive if you don't have a plan for it. So I say all of that in the National Capital Region, we worked on a collective video platform. And as part of our PACE plan, each of those individual agencies have their own video systems and they back them up and they have plans for recovery and so forth in disaster. But there's also a shared system in the National Capital Region, an interoperable video platform in which all the regions and all the agencies within the region publish into. And so you can see video. If you're in Virginia, somewhere in the southwestern tip of Virginia, you can see video from the Maryland Department of Transportation in the northeast corner near the Delaware line. So when you have a thing like a mass evacuation, you've got to overturn chapter tail, or you have a key bridge incident, you're able to see either the incident itself or the traffic ramifications. And it started out amongst the transportation agencies. You mentioned it, EDOT, DC-DOT, Maryland DOT. But since then, we've added Washington Metro. There's all sorts of agencies. There's almost 17,000 cameras and about 200 agencies. And I had hair before I started working on that project. But anyway, so we like to talk, Rob and I, about people, process, and technology. And it's never the technology. It's always the people in the process. And so, but we got it done. And that system, I'm happy to say, is in full use today. It's been used in inaugurations, pretty much every big event. So.
Yeah, and that system really came into play. Some of you may remember because it impacted the nation when we had the trucker convoy. Everybody wanted to drive a truck to DC. So they had to traverse through all those states, but as they got to the National Capital Region, we were able to monitor the trucker convoy utilizing the regional camera position. So the district didn't own those cameras, but we had access to those cameras through the system, which was very beneficial. Again, going back to, if you want to win interoperability, you need real-time situational awareness and common operating picture. I want to bring in the Associate Director for Verizon Wireless Frontline Crisis Response, and he oversees public-private strategy innovation, big part of the emergency communications ecosystem that I mentioned earlier. Earl, how do you and your team prepare for a crisis response?
Yeah, thank you. I'm very privileged, excuse me, easy for me to say, to lead a team in the South, from Virginia all the way around Quality Oceanfront property, about an 80 come across the ocean at the right time of the year, works its way all the way around to Texas, 12 states, and I have a counterpart, Curtis Spence, who's out in the West, and Jason Mitchell, my counterpart, who leads the team in the East. My primary role in leading this team is keeping us prepared 24/7, 365. And I love the way you started the initial conversation about, PACE starts almost personal at home. So, and it's really been an interesting challenge developing this team, a first responder community team in a very large enterprise organization. So we're constantly trying to think about, from a personal perspective, how are we taking care of home? We're deployed for a hurricane. What's your PACE process for home, right? How are you taking it? You are the main breadwinner, and you have to leave for 14 days to support first responders after a Hurricane Michael or Hurricane Ian. What's your home PACE plan start? And then we work down the line. Since we're 24/7, 365, we've got Jake and Bill are here right now. They are crisis responders in the field. So if they're out of their territory, who's behind them? Who's supporting them from a mutual aid perspective? What are the waves of people who might come in? Our organization, the Frontline Crisis Response Team, our primary goal is to support first responders in the field. But our PACE plan from a network deployment capability has waves. So we might be day +1 after Hurricane Ian. We were on scene supporting first responders, but then our PACE plan says, what are the next waves coming in to support the community so they can have outreach to support other levels of first responders as the problems get more acutely identified and we solve those mission critical issues in the field. And what we forget about, there's a lot of information up there about communication, but what are the resources behind that to keep the communications up and running? Power is a huge PACE plan for us. We have to have a primary, an alternative, contingency, an emergency power, making sure that the stuff we want to communicate with can keep going. And so that's a very important one, whether we're using portable SAT power stations to obviously generators or power packs, even personal use once again for that. But also, Butch mentioned it, we eat our own cooking. Mainly we're communicating with each other, but we are not afraid to put alternative carriers in our units, like you mentioned with the Geros, right? Unit where we can utilize the full breadth of whatever is working out there to help first responders stay connected. So there's multiple different levels. Our main role as a crisis response team in a large communication organization is to make sure that you understand what our capabilities are so that you can fit us into your PACE plan, right? So where do we sit and I'm speaking from a public-private perspective, for all carriers or all communications providers, where do we sit in your plan? And it's been a part of my sort of gavel thumping for the 20 years, 30 years I've been in this industry, is I think the public community more than ever are realizing they can't do it alone. And organizations from obviously the carriers to United Rentals, I mean, that business EOC program is really flourishing as well. Where do we fit? Where can we support you? How can we practice with you? We just left North Carolina exercise about a month ago where we were integrated with all the first responders working exercise in the field, bringing out some of the pieces of equipment that they didn't quite have. And then you learn from those type of technologies that can be deployed, how you can build that into your PACE plan. So maybe you don't need to call us or a FirstNet or anybody else, so you can take care of yourself. So multi-layer approach, obviously, because right now we are on call, just like many of you possibly. So we've got to make sure our PACE plans are in effect to make sure that we can keep moving downrange and supporting first responders when their time will be.
No, what would you say? What are the priorities for responding services?
Priorities, obviously for us, is get to the first responders, get to where the base camps are, especially after a major, nothing, I don't care what you say, we're all commercial network at the end of the day. We have public safety features on top of them. nothing can handle a 90-degree break in a fiber optic cable. So, you know, we're all moving downrange, and we're trying to find out through pre-planning where we need to be to get first responders connected, if you will. Obviously, coupled with that, other layers are coming down because the community can't dial 911, which I think we're in the upper 80s now that those calls are made on cell phones now. They can't obviously call in to let public safety first responders know that they're in trouble. So we got to get to the first responders first. Then we have waves, and we sort of are calling in and when we get down there to say, hey, here's the priorities, and that usually will layer down to the communities thereof. And then obviously stabilizing. After a major event, I always call it flip-flops and chainsaws. There's always a group that goes out, they want to clear the yard and they want to break that cable that obviously we're laying down. So we're doing a lot of PACE planning through FEMA to make sure that, the identification of that cabling gets laid down to keep, networks up and running is layered in a PACE plan as well from a recovery perspective.
And I'll add on to that because as a SWIC, and you know this, Charlie, you're communicating with all the carriers your priorities. Because what's their priority might not be yours. And there may be something in the response where there's a critical piece of the comm system that if it was restored, you'd enable primary comms for a lot of people. So we communicate with them and they communicate with us. Hey, is it safe to go into this area to do this restoration or whatnot? And so there is a lot of collaboration. And so if you're managing an incident, you should definitely have on speed dial all of the carriers and partnering with them because you're there together trying to solve that problem.
I'll just add one other thought. In Maryland, we don't have many tornadoes, but we had a tornado in La Plata, and I spent 3 months there doing debris removal. And it sounds like quaint at this point, but at the time, actually marrying the communications teams with the highway and DPW teams to jointly go down, and the power company. It was like heresy at the time. But they used to do it in sequence, but you can't afford to do that because the coordination is unbelievable. So we married the teams up and they would go down streets in rows, if you will. And but that kind of coordination for recovery is really important, otherwise comm suffers.
At the end of the day, every tower has 3 things. It has to have backhaul, it has to have a tower up and running still, and it has to have power. And so that coordination of, hey, do we know if a commercial power is going to be restored in an hour instead of what first of all, we're told 24 hours, then we can prioritize our cutting crews getting to that unit to refuel or to recharge a battery or something like that. So that ballet that takes place is so critical to, I think, getting my markets.
Yeah. Well, to shift back to you, you talked about the PSATs and you briefly talked about LMR, but since you have 2,282 PCs in you, that's a lot of radio systems probably in the state. Is there a PACE plan for LMR in California?
Yeah, so we do have a PACE plan. So for the larger counties, we have counties bigger than some states in terms of people and capability. They have their own LMR systems. So we let them manage their own LMR. Statewide, we manage 37 disparate radio systems. Those stovepipes of excellence that go back to, cylinders of excellence, yeah. But we're in the process of building out a statewide land-mobile radio system. We've got about 80% of the state covered today, and we're continuing that build out. So our PACE planning goes, their primary comms for most public safety is LMR. When LMR goes down, we have a statewide interoperability network that we have. I have 6 mutual aid coordinators distributed throughout the state. They each have a communications trailer equipped with a portable radio site. It's got ECU 2000, the ability to connect radio systems together, and they have caches of radios in there to distribute if needed. They can set up backhaul, and we've tested and have now purchased our own private 5G site that we can roll out. We have 2 of them. We're buying more. So that way, when we roll out on the scene, these guys, the commercial carriers, are usually 24 hours before they can get a power bolt on scene. Generally, I can be there in 2 or 3 hours. Set up a minimal amount of comms to support public safety. And say, LMR, for public safety, but data is now becoming critical. And so we've had to layer in this data capability as well. We have standalone repeaters that are mutual aid repeaters throughout the state. And we also build out a statewide HFNet, which is our emergency plan. So we, in addition to our shares network that we run, we can push data across that as well. A limited amount of email data can go across that system. So we've layered in all of these and we exercise all of them. And that's the key thing. When we go out and deploy, we test all those systems out and make sure they're working. We do a lot of planned events in California and most of the planning for them, the organizers assume that their primary radio system is going to remain active and on the air the entire time with no problems. Very poor assumption. So we'll come in on top of that and layer in sort of those layers. So, and obviously we use satellite phones as well. That's another layer of our backup system. So when my team rolls out, they usually have about 5 different ways that they can communicate. And if you count some of the commercial capability that's involved, maybe 7 different ways that they can communicate. And a lot of what we do is just educating folks that haven't thought this through on what is possible. And then we go get the resources to bring in by working with our partners to layer in a comms layer during an emergency. If they didn't have a PACE plan, then we are the ones that come in and help them with that.
You are their.
We are their PACE plan, yeah, we come in with those resources. So it's a massive state. We, in response to a wildfire, we can deploy 1,000 assets in less than 3 hours. Like we can go from a dirt lot to a staging area with 1,000 fire apparatus and responders in hours because of our pre-staging efforts and everything that we have. And yeah, through fire scope. And so I have technicians that support all that. So it's a pretty impressive plan when you see it rolling. And I usually only get involved when somebody, in 2 ways I get involved. A Congress person or a senator or somebody calls the governor whining and complaining about, providing their feedback on something that's not working properly. And then they'll come to me like, what's broken? Or when there's an unreasonable expectation, right? A lot of times, I've seen in our state operations center, they want to help the carriers engineer their networks. Let's let them go ahead and do that. So a lot of my role is to say, hey, here's what's going on. We don't really need your help right now. We got this under control.
Just a quick intro where you're passing mics there. Your counterpart, you probably know well, Greg Hauser, and I'm based out of Raleigh, North Carolina. Just a couple of injects there. First of all, the amazing things he does at his exercise, not only letting the partner community in, but he will find a place on the side of the mountain someplace, and his deputy, Brandy Amanda, will and have everything deployed from Cisco to FirstNet to Verizon, Frontline, T-Mobile, you name it. And then he'll pretty much tell the teams that are coming in what your primary means of communication is. You just lost that. Now you got to go work with the commercial partners. You got to work with other industry. We got to work within each other to solve now that broken communication problem. When that gets resolved, guess what? You just lost that. So it's a grand exercise. We just completed it, their Nexus a month ago, to exercise on communication of loss to Budget's point. The second thing I just want to bring up, we brought up a little bit TAC, is that integrating the partner community. Listen, there's a lot of trust, and we all got to eat a little humble pie. But getting trust with the partner community to be a part of your ESF2 communications, be a part of the mission deployment that comes out of WebEx. WebUC. It's a safe place for all of us there. We don't want to put things up in there that expose anybody else and expose each other. We just want to be able to integrate and work. It's been an absolutely miracle, the things they've done in North Carolina. There's another application called Bridge for Public Safety. In essence, it's a background communication school. It's sort of like Slack for first responders. I'm on a couple different states one right now, and it's that back end code communication that you can have between each other. That's a safe place, and you can get things done. And the third thing, obviously, we talked about that situational awareness being integrated as a dot on the map from a safety perspective from the individual, but also as a deployment capability for, hey, this carrier said they're going to put this unit there. Is it still there? Yes, it's a dot on the map. We can see it's broadcasting or video information, anything like that to ingrain the partner community from the public-private partnership perspective into your response is the key to success.
And I'll say this, when someone reports an outage, your very first question should be, have you ever been able to communicate from that piece of dirt? Because media case goes many times
Cross states.
Yeah, and it's like, well, no, well, then makes you think during a disaster, you would be able to communicate there.
So I would say, it's going to make me very happy when you have a Pace Plus plan. You probably wouldn't have sized it to Hawaii here, but since you got the market corner, you're not gonna get it.
I wanted to add two thoughts. One thing we did in the National Capital Region that might be beneficial for everybody here is we hold, maybe not every year, but every other year, a command vehicle rally where you get the command post vehicles. And they aren't often, they're used regularly within an agency, but they're not often used together in a multi-agency event. So we have a command post rally where they get together and they have a plug fest and get to play, and that's also a useful exercise if you don't do it. Second thing I was gonna say is, coming from transportation, we have trailers, communication trails and the like as well in Maryland. Now, we don't have as much ground to cover. But when they looked around and they said, where can we put these trailers? They wanted to put them at the district offices of the State Highway Administration because they're 24/7. They have trucks, they can haul the trailers anywhere. Oftentimes you have to have signage and orange cones and all sorts of stuff deployed with it. So that's another thing to think about as you deploy these assets in the state.
There you go.
I get this.
Go ahead. Well, John, since you're calling, I know you work with DHS S&T over the years. Let's talk about other communications pathways that S&T has been exploring and how will they impact the Pace Plus?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I think we'll take us a right turn here. One of the projects I've been associated with over the years has been a thing called data casting. How many people have heard of that? Show of hands. Yeah, that's what I suspected. Data casting are commercially known as next gen TV. How many people have heard of next gen TV? Okay, if you go buy a TV these days, you'll see a little symbol on there that says next gen TV. And basically what that is not unlike next gen 911. It's new features and capabilities. It's the new standard called ATSC 3.0. And what ATSC 3.0 is, it's an all IP end-to-end infrastructure. And it was actually developed in conjunction with 3GPP standards. And so I know this is a bit of a bone of contention between the broadcast community and the telecom community, but aside from that, I think it belongs in the PACE plan. I had the good fortune of working with Hong Lu over here back from 2014 to 2018, and we did about a half a dozen deployments across the country of ATSC 3 deployments for public safety communications. What it is you're able to inject an encrypted data stream within the over-the-air broadcast signal of the television station. And so the TV station, this new standard has a better video compression. And so it frees up 1 to 5 megabits of bandwidth that's available to public safety to insert their data flow. Now, it is a one-way communications channel. So you typically need telecom as part of the backhaul to communicate back. But it is a very efficient and effective way to do one-to-many broadcasts. And the particular mediums like video, it's a very effective means to do data distribution. So if you've got a video clip, you've got a picture, you've got any kind of multimedia like that, you're able to send it to everybody all at once, one-to-many broadcast capabilities, just like television. There's no congestion. If you've got a receive device, you can receive that transmission. So from a PACE planning standpoint, that's important. And we did projects in Boston with the Coast Guard. That was interesting in the sense that they lose cellular communications once they get about a mile off the coast, whereas TV communications goes a dozen miles out. And so they're able to receive images of boats and swimmers and the like. We did one in Adams County, Indiana, an active shooter where we brought video from inside the school back to the TV station, broadcast to both the command post and the state EOC. We've done all sorts of projects. So I know we've used it in DC and continue to use it for inauguration and other large events. So I think it's part of the PACE plan and it deserves consideration. Right now, about 60% of the television stations in the country have deployed ATSC 3. So within the next 2 to 3 years, you'll see it across the entire country. And if you haven't investigated that, that's an important component of your plan.
Yeah, I agree. And again, data casting, something that we look at for our C and E in the PACE plan, take advantage of those public safety airways. It's different from our spectrum, and it certainly has the true and true again doing anything else. So I think it's worthwhile looking at. One of the downsides is one-to-many transmissions on it. You can't go backward, but there's certain workarounds that can happen down the road. But, I think it's certainly evolving with technology doing. So we're coming up short on time here. We got a couple of minutes before lunch, so I wanted to see if the audience has any questions for our panel. We'll let them off that easy. I know you guys are hungry. Panel, anything in closing?
Do I need to break up my pop sack cater for this? Is that literal flex used to be?
One thing I did want to mention before we leave the data casting thing, Grasso, who was supposed to be on this panel, he's doing a pretty cool project in North Carolina where the television TV signal coverage is much better in the remote areas of the state than the telecom carriers coverage. So as many of you know, pagers are kind of a thing of the past, and yet the volunteer fire service relies on pagers to advise them to report to the station and call. So they've developed a device used and leveraging ATSC to do paging to firemen in North Carolina using the public television station broadcast. So that's another application that's been done that's public safety oriented. It's pretty cool.
We're covering North Carolina with a handful of towers.
Okay, Mike, we'll turn it over to you. Thank you, guys. How about a hand for the panel?
Okay, well, that wraps up our panels for this morning. Wasn't that great? Yes, sir. What do you think about the whole workshop? All right, so 11:45, right on time. We've got lunch and vendor expo. And then at 1 o'clock, we will be heading over to Developer City to the Emergency Operations Training Center. If you look in the UBA app, you'll see the address. It's on Stillwater Avenue and the street, I'm sure, in College Station.
Does that actually?
And we will see you there if you're participating in the training. We'll see you there at 2 o'clock. From 2 to 5:30, we'll be doing the training and the exercise preview. So the last half hour is going to be the exercise preview. The first part of it is the training, going through the various technologies, how they're going to be used in the exercise, things like that. Then at 5:30, we have dinner. And then starting at 6:30, we have transportation back to, we still done that? Fix me.
Hi, everyone. Yes, if you need a ride, we are going to probably Uber you. The buses have not been utilized and we don't want to waste resources. So let us know if you need a ride, but we're going to stop it. Also for the vendors who need to set up with equipment, you'll want to go to, and I'm sending out an email with a map and a Google map, and hopefully everybody will know where to go. But with vendors who need to unload for the vendor area, you'll want to go to the rescue building and check in there, and then I can help you navigate where your spot is. There's plenty of time to set up, so if you would like to go to the training or need to go to the training, it's totally fine. But the vendors, anyone who is not part of the training or is on the staff to set up a vendor tent, you will go to the rescue building. So it's the first building when you go into the entrance, first building to the left, parking is behind it, and the tents are to the right. Everyone else going to the Emergency Operations Training Center is further down the road, and we'll have signs directing you. Okay, if you have any questions, let me know. It's going to be hot, so most of this is outside. So just be prepared for that. We need you to we'll have sunscreen and whatnot, but, it will be hot, so dress appropriately. We do require closed-toed shoes and pants. Everybody pants.